Om Sadashivasamarambham
Shankaracharyam
Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om. Vishwanath, can you start with the 9th verse?
Yeah.
Hari Om, Doctor.
Go
Hari
ahead.
Om, everyone. So today is the 9th verse, and it's about supreme devotion. Bhava Shunya Sat, Bhava Susthiti, Bhavana Balat, Bhakti Uttama. So this verse talks about supreme devotion. Devoid of thought, modifications, and in the existence principle being firmly established by the strength of the thought, God am I, this is supreme devotion. So this verse also talks about enlightenment, and it is in the para bhakti stage where the devotee realizes that there is something beyond duality. And when you talk about duality, you're talking about the concept of God being separate from any other person. The devotee realizes that they cannot be a separate, that Ishvara and the devotee himself cannot be a separate part from this all-pervading consciousness or Ishvara. And this is the Soham thought, that is Sa plus Ham, I am that, or God I am. This thought is the ultimate bhakti. It is called Para Bhakti or Uttama Bhakti. And Bhava Shunya and Sadbhava. So you can see it's a poetic license here with Bhava Shunya and Sadbhava, where it's juxtaposing between Bhava Shunya, complete or zero identification is needed in order to identify with the ultimate truth. Shunya means zero. Sri Ramana shares here that you should identify with nothing else. And still, when this happens, there is an aspect that remains, which is Sat or existence, which is awareness. When we stop identifying with our body, mind, intellect, and pleasure, possessions, or position, then what remains is truth. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna calls this Ananya Bhakti. Bhakti is to love or to be devoted. When I don't love the finite, then I will naturally love the infinite. This is like ending all other thoughts, and what remains is only Sat. This state is so auspicious that it has the prefix of Su, Susthiti. And Su in Sanskrit refers to auspiciousness or good. In Bhagavad Gita, it is called Sthita Prajna Lakshana, which means that it is the auspicious state of firm abidance with the all-pervading consciousness. It is unwavering. If the devotee reaches this state, it is permanent. This is enlightenment. And there is complete clarity about what Bhagwan is. In this state, there is no bhavana or attachment with God because there is only unity and oneness. For example, if you are watching a movie and you are very sleepy and you constantly tell yourself, I'm so sleepy, I'm tired, I need to sleep. So that constant thought of sleep is there. You want sleep. And when you finally sleep, do you have that thought of sleep? No, because you are that which you could possibly be. You would have attained what you desired. And similarly, when you are the all-pervading consciousness, there is no duality or no thoughts about God or attachment or no emotion towards God because you are beyond that. You have realized that all these are too material to be God. You are God is what I mean. You realize that you are one with the all-pervading consciousness. When the thoughts end or become zero, you realize the Sat. Bhavana Balad. So Balad refers to strong in Sanskrit, and it refers to a strong conviction that I am that existence. In Upanishads, we talk about I am Atma Brahman or Aham Brahmasmi or Tattvamasi. This verse refers to that Tattvamasi, that feeling of Tattvamasi that you get. You need immense strength to disidentify with the material world and your body to accept the oneness of Bhagwan. The reason you need strength is because in our cycle of birth and death and in attachment and samsara, you find it very hard to detach yourself from your material world, detach yourself from relationships, But if you could realize that you are that consciousness and the consciousness in me is the consciousness in you, then you realize that there is no attachment or detachment because you are that. And this state that is experienced by the devotee is para bhakti or supreme devotion. It is just pure being. And this is that bhakti uttama. Thank you.
Thank you, Vindhya. It was a very nice and a clear explanation of what Sri Krishna talks of the para bhakta or the highest form of bhakta. Ramana's words are very cryptic and brief, but you made a very nice elaboration of each word so that we could understand. Nice. The whole family is there as always. We go to Dr. Ahalya. Ahalya, your time.
Namaste. Harihi Om. The whole objective of spirituality is to establish ourselves in Atma Bhava, merge the lower self into the higher self, the small I into the I in Ramana's language. This union can be achieved through any of the means of sadhana, bhakti, jnana, karma, or Ashtanga Yoga. With the 9th verse, so beautifully explained by Vindhya, the topic of karma and upasana is over. He talks of Ashtanga Yoga 11 and 12, Jnana Yoga from verse 13 onwards. In verse 10, he summarizes the essence of Upadesha Sara or Anubhava Sara as the text may be called. Works like Upadesha Sara, Avadhuta Gita, or spontaneous outbursts of a Jivan Mukta, someone who is intoxicated with the joy of living or being. There are two ways of communications as per Shastra. The Neti Neti Marga, especially when an Anubhava or experience had to be shared. It is Anirvachaniya. So how to put that experience through? By negating what can be spoken, like in Nirvana Shataka. It is like removing the debris. The other is Iti Marga, the path of construction with pointers. Upadesha Sara is considered as a comprehensive Prakarana Grantha that encapsulates the essence of Upanishad. With the guidance from a guru, each shloka can be grasped for its exact meaning. Hritstale Manaha Swastata Kriya Bhakti Yoga Bodhascha Nishchitam. The meaning, it has been ascertained that the goal of the path of action, devotion, Ashtanga Yoga, and knowledge is the abidance of the mind in the heart. This is similar to the very famous quote of Swami Vivekananda, each soul is potentially divine, the goal is to manifest the divinity within. Do it by work or worship, psychic control or philosophy, by one or more or all of these, and be free, underlined. We need to remember, irrespective of the path of sadhana, jnana, bhakti, ashtanga, karma, the goal is to bring the mind, the lower self or ahankara, back to the consciousness or hrit as mentioned in this shloka, or the higher self. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoh. We have often heard this Brahma Bindu Upanishad Vakya. In the transactional world, mind gets lost from its own source, and to remind it constantly to get back to the source, the sadhana marga becomes very helpful. All sadhanas have but one goal, that is manasvastata. It amounts to absorbing the mind, manonasha or laya, thereby freeing the jiva from the tyranny of thoughts. Hritstale manaha swastata. Mind in its own abide. Swa is self, sta is to be. Swastha is a commonly used term which means yasmin atmani ananda rupena tishtatiti swastha. Such a beautiful word that we commonly use, to be in oneself. As we know, to be anchored in the permanent peace, happiness and security mode, the mind must abide in its own nature, hrit or consciousness. Mind abiding in external objects causes stress. Ramana says, this Atma is in us, in our own hearts, as the Chaitanya Shakti. DVG also says, Hudugihu dadelli paramatmani tanuvinali, Hridayadalu medulinalu. Hridaya is the source of all that, in which all live, and that into which we all finally merge. This is from where the I springs, says Ramana Maharshi. In Mundakopanishad 2:2-7, the second line says, Divye Brahmapure Hyesha Vyomyatma Pratishtitaha. Same Brahman happens to be Jivatma, the consciousness. Therefore, one need not go anywhere in search of that Brahman. It is inside our body, located in one's heart, Brahmapuram, as the shloka says. Heart is the original or actual location of the mind, Jiva. It's as in the heart, mind is there. In the mind, thoughts are there. Behind the thoughts, consciousness is there, illumining the presence and absence of thoughts that is rising and setting. And that consciousness is Brahman. Kriya, Karma Yoga, as we have seen, Yogastha Kuru Karmani, Bhakti Yoga, a very powerful sadhana combining Upasana, Karma, and as just Vindhya said, God in the Parabhakti mode, not as a means or journey, but me as God. Ashtanga Yoga, in fact, Patanjali says, Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. So idea is to get into the swarupa. Jnana Yoga, Atma Jnana. Nishchitam, definitely, fixed. Ni upasarga is added to ti, chi chayane dhatu. To sum up the shloka, fixing the mind in the heart, consciousness, which is its own source, is the ultimate goal of all sadhanas. When the mind, the lower self, merges with its source, the higher self, what remains is mere Sakshi Bhava. Namaste, sir.
Thank you. Thanks, Ahalya. Again, another wonderful explanation. We could understand everything which Ramana wanted to express. We go to Dr. Sandhya. Your time starts.
I hope I'm clear today, sir. Is it clear, sir? Am I audible?
Go ahead, please. Audible, clear.
So we come to verse 11. Karma, Upasana and Ashtanga Yoga are the preparatory steps on the spiritual path to enlightenment. They give us the Jnana Yogyata for spiritual knowledge. Verses 11 and 12 discuss Ashtanga Yoga. Verse 11 discusses Pranayama specifically for the seeker who's interested in controlling the mind. Coming to the verse, Vayurodhanat liyate mana jala pakshiva rodha sadhanam. Vayurodhanat is by the control of the prana or the breath. Liyate mana, the thoughts in the wandering mind subside. Jala pakshivat, like the net used to trap the birds. Rodha sadhanam, it is a means to keep the mind in check. Here Bhagavan discusses prana viksha, the regulation and control of breath by observing it. When it's practiced as a spiritual sadhana, it helps to calm the mind. So how does pranayama assist one? Like the jala pakshivat, the net used to ensnare birds, it helps to restrain the mind. So let's understand prana. Prana means breath, respiration, life, vitality, wind, energy, strength. Ayama means length, expansion, stretching, or restraint. So pranayama is thus the extension of the breath and its control. The act of breathing consists of inhalation. When you look at the act of breathing, it consists of inhalation, that is puraka, filling up of the lungs with life-giving air, exhalation, rechaka, emptying of the lungs, retention, kumbhaka, holding the breath where there is no inhalation or exhalation. Kumbhaka further is Antara Kumbhaka or Bahya Kumbhaka, depending on whether it's at the end of inhalation or exhalation. So this breath can be manipulated in many ways, and the Hatha Yoga Pradipika states that it has to be done very cautiously or it could be injurious to a person. But what Bhagavan says is that simple observation of the breath is what is required. So pranayama is the science of breath. It is said that a yogi's life is not measured by the number of days, but by the number of breaths. Therefore, rhythmic pattern of breathing strengthens the respiratory system, it calms the mind, it reduces the desires and the cravings. The mind then becomes fit for contemplation. But this is only temporary. The nature of the mind remains the same, unchanged. Just as once the net is cut, the birds fly away. Once we lose the control of pranayama, the control of breath, the mind begins wandering again. So Adi Shankara says, the emptying of the mind is true rechaka or exhalation. The realization that I am Atma is the true puraka or inhalation. And the steady sustenance of the mind on this conviction that I am the Atma is the true kumbhaka or retention. This is true pranayama. There is an unconscious, repetitive prayer that goes on in every living creature throughout life. This is the Ajapa mantra. Soham, I am that immortal spirit with every inward breath, and with every outgoing breath, it is Hamsa, I am he. Like Sir always says, Soham, Hamsa Shiva Soham, that beautiful mantra. The yogi fully realizes the significance of this Ajapa mantra and is released from bondage. So offering up our every breath to the Lord is sacrifice, and receiving the every breath of life from the Lord as a blessing is what will help us control our mind. And through this practice of pranayama, there is a harmony that is established between the individual Pinda Prana and the cosmic breath that is the Brahmanda Prana. So the prana in the Jivatma is part of the cosmic breath of the universal spirit that is the Paramatma. You can use the same analogy of the chariot and the horses here. The chariot is the chitta, mind, intellect or ego, which is yoked to two powerful horses. One is the prana, that is the breath, and the other is the vasana, the desire. The chariot naturally will move in the direction of the more powerful animal. If the breath is in control, the desires are controlled and the senses are held in check and the mind is stilled. So pranayama is one efficient method of quietening the mind. Hari Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya. Another very nice explanation of the importance of pranayama and mind control. We have Dr. Sandhya again, Dr. Sandhya Nanjundaya. Madam, your time starts.
Chitta Vayvaya, Chitta Kriya Yuta, Shakayo Dvayi, Shakti Mulakaha. Now, as Dr. Sandhya originally said, the prana is very important to control the mind. And this shloka actually tells us why this is so. It says that the mind and the vital forces, that is the pranas, are two branches of the one basic Maya Shakti of the Lord. Now, from Prakriti Maya, it is said 5 Panchabhutas arise, that is the 5 elements of nature, and these 5 elements have all the 3 gunas mixed up. If you have a predominance of Sattvic guna, you have a Jnana Shakti or the mind. If you have predominance of Rajas, you have the vital airs or the prana forces. And of course, if you have Dravya Shakti, which is Tamas, you have the bodily functions. Out of all of them, the mind and the pranas are most important for the sadhaka. Now let us look at the pranas again. Out of these pranas, there are 5 of them: prana, apana, udana, samana, and vyana. And these are like the autonomic nervous system in the body, which control all the functions: digestion, excretion, lungs, heart, and so on. So these, out of these 5 pranas, they are not only the most important is the breath, as Dr. Sandhya mentioned, that is the ingoing and outgoing of the respiratory system. But let us remember that these pranas actually connect matter and energy of the body with the consciousness and mind on the other side. So they are actually the linking force. Out of all the 5 pranas, the ones that we can really have good control is under conscious will is the breathing system or the respiratory system. It is the only autonomic function that we can actually control by ourselves. Digestion, heart rate and all that are really not under complete control. Now, what happens is that when the mind is upset or disturbed, we find there is increase in autonomic activity, increase in prana shakti activity, and as we know, our heart rate, respiratory rate, all these things go up. So we are very well aware that if you control prana, the mind is also automatically controlled. Now, the mind is like a driver of this car. The pranas are the accelerators and brakes which are put on by the mind itself. So therefore, control of mind can be easily done with control of the prana shakti also. In fact, the Prashnopanishad 3.3 says, Atmana Isha Prano Jayate Yataisha Purushe, and so on, which means prana comes from the self like the shadow of a person, enters the body and follows the thought. So therefore, in this way, Prana Shakti can be easily used to control the mind. Otherwise, the thoughts keep running around in the mind like a monkey, and the mind is extremely difficult to control. Now, I also want to mention that there are some scientific data that support the use of pranayama as far as mental cognition, mental sadhana is concerned. Now, my pranams to the various erudite neurosurgeons and neurologists that we have. Our own mentor is actually a stalwart in neurosciences, but I would make a small attempt to tell here what is going on when we do pranayama. It actually contributes three things to the neurological system. First of all, pranayama itself is a huge science. Many people have had a lot of details which I'm not going to go into. But when you control the breath consciously, that is with inspiration and expiration, and the ratio is about 4 to 6. Normally, we breathe at about 12 to 14 times a minute. And if we can control this breath, our autonomic system comes under control. Not only that, any attention to breathing, watching the breath, activates areas in the anterior cingulate cortex, precuneus, and insula, which are increased in core consciousness, awareness, and perception. And if we voluntarily reduce the respiratory rate, increase in the frontotemporal and insular area, decision-making, cognition, awareness of self, everything markedly increases. And as you can see, all this is very beneficial for our spiritual growth. Normally, when we have an EEG of the brain, we have a large number of alpha waves, but when you do pranayama and mind control, a lot of delta waves are formed, which relax the mind and the body. In fact, the mountain Arunachala is supposed to be radiating delta waves at all times, and therefore this is particularly auspicious area for us to do our sadhana. So therefore, in conclusion, not only does the prana influence the mind, it has positive effects on our cortex, that is brain cortex, on the autonomic nervous system, on our brain waves, and concluding with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali 252, Tatah Kshiyate, Prakasha, Avarnam, and so on. The waves of the mind dissolve by the use of pranayama itself, and this is one easy way for us to control the mind, especially when we are trying to do sadhana and be a good sadhaka. Hari Om, pranams.
Thank you, Dr. Sandhya, for giving a lot of scientific information to tell us how through pranayama we have greater control on the mind. We have Radha, it's your time.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Laya vinashane ubhaya rodhane layagatam puna bhavati no mritam. These are beautiful words. So much has been talked about pranayama, meditation, mind control so far. This also talks about mind, but little more addition. Here jnana also comes other than technique. Dr. Ahalya was talking about one beautiful verse, Manayeva Manushyanam Karanam Bandhamokshayo. Here it says that mind is one responsible for being in bondage, and it is the one which helps us to also liberate ourselves. Bhagavan Ramana always used to use two words, Manolayam and Mano Nashanam, two words. Most of the time we think Layam and Nashanam means the same. We have to be little careful here in understanding. The first word of the word says Laya Vinashane. There are two things here, Manolaya and Mano Nashana totally. Manolaya is absorption, which means it is paused temporarily. See, if you look at our old or elders or scriptures, when they say the last thought when a person is dying is very important, because that becomes the beginning for the next life. Also, whatever thoughts we go to sleep in the night, the same thoughts come to us when we get up in the morning. Whatever thought we are meditating upon, or while meditating, whatever thought is there in our mind before or during meditation, once we finish the meditation, the same thought comes to the mind at first. So what this means is, whenever a person dies or goes to sleep or sits for meditation, whatever is the last thought comes back afterwards, which means our mind was paused or controlled only temporarily. If Anubhavananda lectures, if one has heard, he always says, you do meditation for 1 hour and 24 hours you're frustrated. What it means is, while meditating or while sleeping or while doing any technique of mind control, the mind is only temporarily put to pause. And it bounces back with all the vasanas and tendencies, and there is no much change in a seeker's spiritual journey. Here, Laya means when a thing is in seed form, and the seed has got all the potentialities to germinate. But Vinashana means when you roast the seed cannot germinate further. That means you're removing all the impurities, and through jnana, you're roasting the seed so that it does not germinate again and again. Here, in mind control or meditation or pranayama, it is going to laya. Laya means it will be paused and it will resume back. This is one part of the approach. Here in this verse, the second word says, Laya vinashane ubhaya rodhane. Ubhaya rodhane means we need to have two-way approach here. One approach is we have the technique of meditation or pranayama or whatever to absorb the mind, that is do the laya. And what happens, we can meditate only for 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours in a day. 24 hours we cannot meditate. So 24 hours we need to have a lifestyle where we are doing Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana. This is the second approach. By doing this continuous Shravana, Manana, Nididhyasana and bringing in Jnana through Jnana, when we attend classes like this, we know what is our true nature. So we do inquiry, what is my true nature, and dwelling in the true nature and spending some time in meditation. This two-way approach helps us in getting to something called Punabhavati Namrutam. Means again the mind will not come back. It will be totally be killed or destroyed, or it will be totally absorbed into the consciousness. This is called Samadarshana. When you can see the Sukha and Dukkha with the same equanimity, when this comes, then there is no coming back to the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Radha. Another very nice explanation. We go to Neeta. Neeta, your time starts.
Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. This is almost similar to the last verse. So we moved from Karma Yoga to Bhakti Yoga and Upasana Yoga, and then we came to Ashtanga Yoga. And then both the Dr. Sandhyas explained how we can restrain the mind by doing pranayama. Then in verse 13, Radhaji explained that we cannot continue to be in meditation or to quieten the mind like that. And this is very temporary. So this part of quietening the mind is called manolaya. When we are doing pranayama, or we are doing, we are in samadhi, or we are doing meditation, or even while we are sleeping, or liquor also can do the same thing, that is quietening of the mind. But it is temporary. And so in this verse, we go more to the second part, which is manonasha, but that is destroying of the whole the mind. And what is this destroying of the mind is what we're going to be talking a little more in detail. That is, she said, the roasted seed. The verse is pranabandhanat linamanasham ekachintanat nasham ityadha. By restraining the pranas, the mind gets quietened. And by using this quietened mind, we contemplate on that one, and the mind gets destroyed. So manolaya is, we are quietening the mind. It is temporary. We know that now, we understand that. But we cannot underplay this quiet mind, and we should not, not do that. We know even to get for an hour, it's very difficult to quieten the mind. But sometimes we see that when we come out of that meditation, we are even more angry or even more anxious. So we have to know what's the use of this Manolaya mind, this quietened mind. And what we do is during this quietened mind is when we have to do contemplation. Contemplation, ekachintana. Contemplation of what? Of the one, without the second, the Advaita Brahman. And we realize that what is our Eka Swarupam, the Jivatma and Paramatma is one, and the Brahma Satyam, Jagat Mithya, Jiva Brahmeva Napara. How will we do this? We have to go to a guru. So with this training of this, quietening the mind, and during this time, we go to a guru and we get the knowledge and go through Shravanam, Mananam, Nididhyasanam. So, and this is what what will happen, the mind will get destroyed. What is destroyed? Does the mind really get destroyed? Does the Jnani not have a mind? No, the Jnani has the mind. But when he's saying destroyed, he means the destroying of the ignorance. Ignorance in the mind is taken over by knowledge. And that is what happens. This person destroys the desire lineage. That is, he becomes aware of himself, and that's why he will not. He knows that he should not seek, peace, security, and happiness from the world, and he gets free from the bondage formed from karma, and he knows that he is Tattvamasi. He is that, and he loses his individuality. And this person is called a Utkrishta Yogi, the benefits of which will be explained in the next verse. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neeta. Another very nice explanation. Nothing that I can add on. You've touched on everything. We go to the next speaker, that is Karthik. Please go ahead, Karthik.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Now, we are talking about two concepts that have always been kind of talked about a lot, but understood very little, by me at least. That is Manaha and Mano Nashaha. So let's see what Manaha is and what Varuna tells Bhrigu Rishi in Bhriguvalli. So he says Manaha is a subtle form of matter at best. Sometimes people define mind as a flow of thoughts. This idea is not accepted by the Vedas. Vedas say mind is a substance, an intangible material, or a sukshma dravya, wherein thoughts rise and subside, but the mind, the material itself, remains as is. Mind continues even in Sushupti, because we know in Sushupti, if the mind goes away, then we will not wake up. Thoughts are a function of the mind, and subtle matter mind, it continues. Now, we have seen this in Manomaya Kosha. So, the suffix Maya conveys that it is a Karyam. So, the word Swarnamayam means Swarna Karyam. So, even the total mind, Hiranyagarbha, is subject to birth. Hence, it is a Karyam. Now, this is point number one. Point number two is, again, we'll go back to Tattva Bodha. We'll look at Shama and Dhamma. I mean, all of this go together. These are pairs that go. Shama cannot be talked about without Dhamma. So they say if you have, Shama, you don't require Dhamma. Anyway, so Shama is defined again as what? Mano Nigraha. So that is again a very complicated thing. So when I went through some talks, I got this very wonderful definition. Shama is availability of the mind. It's just availability of the mind for you, for yourself. And it is the ability to process emotions, negative and positive, to resolution. That is Shama. Dhamma, another definition was, we see it as Bahyendra Nigraha, that is sense control. But that again is complicated. A simpler thing would be Dhamma is appropriate responses. It is the ability to say yes or no without being carried away by reactions. So it talks about the person. It is the person who has these qualities. It is a person with reference to mind, no doubt. And because of that, we say that the issue is with the mind, but it is with a person. So Shama, so 2 points here. Mind is a substance, number one, and we need to have Shama and Dhamma. Now let's go to this. Now, if we understand this Mano Nasha becomes slightly easier to explain. Nashta Manasaha Utkrishta Yoginaha Krityam Astikim Swastitim Yataha. So it is a rhetorical question. So Utkrishta Yoginaha is defined as the greatest yogi. Utkrishta is the supreme yogi. And Nashta Manasa is mind has been destroyed within quotes. Swastitim Yataha, and one who abides in his Atma Swarupam, who has discovered his inner self. Krityam Kim Asti, what is there to be accomplished for the sake of fulfillment? Again, as I said, it is a rhetorical question. So Ramana Maharshi talks about two things here. One about Mano Nigraha, that is, I don't want to say destroying the mind, but anyway, I'll go ahead and say it. He whose mind has been destroyed. Then the next one is he who is established in self, Yoginaha, that's all. So the answer to this is nothing in specific. As Swami Anubhavananda says, do nothing. I mean, a person of a liberated mind, you have no desires. Because you're liberated, you do not have avarana. And because you do not have avarana, you do not have any kama. And because you do not have kama, there is nothing to be done. Nothing, absolutely. So how does such a person reach the state of Utkrishta Yoginaha? So by Vichara, he is arrived at the understanding that he is a Jivan Mukta. He is ever Purna. He is a person who has actually won 3 out of 5 matches. That is the allegory. And the rest of his life is a relaxed life. He is not affected by samsara. Ramana says he is the greatest of yogis because he has passed through all the yoga successfully. We saw a lot of pranayama and things. So this Utkrishta Yoginanga has passed all of those yoga successfully, karma yoga, upasana yoga, ashtanga yoga in the interim, and jnana yoga. Such a yogi abides in his Atma Swarupam. He has discovered that he need not look anywhere else for peace. And it is his inner self is the only source. That is Swastitihi. So he continues to work with happiness and not for happiness. Now, how does Mano Nasha actually, again, within quotes, happen in this person? So Swamiji says he falsifies his mind, meaning he makes his mind available to him at all times. Remember the definition of Shama? That. He willfully processes emotions, and he concludes that mind is Vyavaharaka Satyam and Atma is Paramarthika Satyam. Mind is Mithya, it does not affect the consciousness. He was, is, and ever will be free from body and mind instruments. Mind and its conditions have nothing to do with his freedom or fullness. Mithya Vastu cannot improve or damage Satya Vastu. So quality of the mind conditions has nothing to do with his freedom or Purnatvam. He's essentially a very successful person. Now, what is the question here? Krityamasti Kim. How does the Jiva Mukta not do anything? Now, the sense of duty comes from a role that society gives him. It is an assigned kind of an activity. So the role is based on giving objective reality to what he sees in the world. Vidhi or Nishedha is only for Ajnanis. This is one such explanation that Ramana Maharshi did not participate in the freedom struggle, despite being repeatedly asked for it. Then Swastitim Yataha. The Gnani has no sense of duty as he knows his true Swarupa. He goes about his life in the most natural way. There is no pressure, no motivation, no insecurity urging him to do anything. For him, Vyavaharika happenings do not taint the Paramarthika Satyam. Now, claiming Atmanyam Atmanatushtaha is what he does at all times. He abides in his Swarupa. So, Swarupa Swastha Yataha. He has attained his Swarupa. Now, I just spoke in third person. So, here in the following 15 shlokas, Ramana Maharshi details on how to claim all of these as myself, Aham Brahmasmi, and reiterate to myself that bodies and minds do not have awareness. It is the awareness that has bodies and minds. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Karthik. Another masterly presentation. Each of their presentations are so wonderful. There is just nothing that I can add on. You have covered it so beautifully. Swami Anubhavananda in this verse calls this a super deluxe yogi, a person who has accomplished all the purusharthas. What is there for him to be done? There is an entire chapter in Panchadashi. It is called Tripti Deepa Prakarana. Tripti Deepa Prakarana takes one verse from the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, which is something like this. Once a person has achieved Purnatvam, what is there for him to do? What does he have to struggle with his life? And Vidyaranya, 298 verses on this. So someday when we will have an understanding of the mind of a Jnani. And as Karthik said, the mind is certainly not destroyed. But then now the mind just becomes an instrument for you to do whatever you want. But now you have understood yourself and you know there is nothing to do, nowhere to go. This mantra has been given to me and I love this mantra. I will chant this. Drishya varitam chittamatmanaha chitvadarshanam tatvadarshanam. We now come to a turning point in the whole Upadeshasara. From this verse onward, this is considered like the seed mantra. The rest of the whole Upadeshasara is a sort of an elaboration of this verse. And this verse is an explanation of what is called Drik Drishya Viveka. This verse, Swamiji explains this, is with self-knowledge. From here onwards, he says these words are a little cryptic. And those who have the knowledge of the Upanishads will be able to understand. And he says, Upadesha Sara is Upanishada Sara. So we have to have self-knowledge. What is self-knowledge? Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. I am that. And when you have that knowledge, then whatever objects that you can see and experience, you negate as not I, including my body. Just like Mano Buddhi Hankara Chittani Naham. Finally, you come to Chidananda Rupa Shivoham Shivoham. And the final declaration is that consciousness which finally remains is none other than Tattva Darshan. Swami Paramarthananda ji has given us two fundamental principles of Vedanta. If these two are understood, the rest of the Upadeshasara will be beautifully understood. As I again said, the rest of the Upadeshasara is really cryptic, and let us dwell on these fundamental principles. The first fundamental principle deals with Drik Drishya Viveka. I, the experiencer, the subject, I'm different from whatever I experience. Whatever I experience in front of me is an object of my experience and it is not me. My body is an object of my experience. I see my mind also. So none of them are me. The second and even more difficult to understand, Swamiji uses the word mind-boggling. Mind-boggling means it is extremely difficult for the mind to understand because it is certainly beyond the mind. But this has to be, take some time and understand this. It says, any attribute that I experience belongs to the objects of my experience. Supposing I see a black pen. Blackness belongs to the pen and not to me, the experiencer. And finally, it leaves me, the experiencer, the consciousness, without any attributes. We need to understand this beautiful term of nirguna. All these have come from verse 12 to verse 26 of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Now, if this is understood, we transcend form, and this is real transformation. My body is limited in this place, but I have no limitations in space. I am all pervading. My body has a date of birth and a date of expiry, but the consciousness which enlivens this body has been there from the very beginning and will continue to be there for all the time. Once this understanding is there, what do? I now know I am this all-pervading consciousness temporarily associated with this body-mind. And I use this body-mind to transact, but all the time understanding the previous verse, Nashta Manasa Utkrishta Yoginaha. So do your transactions not for happiness, but out of happiness. And if this is understood, such knowledge is Tattva Darshan. A little more elaboration to say why this whole world is mithya. This whole world is mithya because now any experience happens through the instrument of the mind. And therefore, this whole world appears to me as a thought. It comes into my eyes as an image. From my eyes, it comes to my brain as an image. So the whole world, which Ramana has expressed in a in the Saddarshanam, which Swami Param explains when he's explaining this verse, Shabdadi Rupam Bhuvanam Samastam. The entire world is Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha. And because it is dependent on my body-mind complex for its existence, all of them have a dependent existence, and a dependent existence is not real existence. Now, why is it not real? The Swamiji gives an example. He says, if the beauty is dependent on dress and jewelry, it is not real beauty. What is the real me? The real me is one that does not need any mind, any sense organ to prove its existence. For instance, if I need to know if I am here, I don't need to feel myself, I don't need to see myself. That I, which does not need an instrument to prove its existence, is the real me. So this verse is saying, move from the object to the subject, as it is said in the verse, Pratibodha Viditam Matam. And if you have understood this, like the Swamiji's favorite example of light on the hand. When I see my hand, I'm able to see the hand because of the light on the hand. I'm able to see the light because of my eyes. I'm able to see the light in my eyes because of my mind. And my mind is illumined by consciousness. And because of that, in every experience, Drishya Varitam, move from the object to the subject. With that, I conclude my presentation. I will go slightly beyond my brief. Sachin, my time is over, because from verse 17 to verse 24, we are attending to the most cryptic parts of the whole Upadeshasara. We have 73 odd people still listening. Now, this verse has been allotted to 7 or 8 people for the next class. But I want all of you to take each of these verses, make your own presentation. See, we are in satsang. There are a lot of people whom you know will be able to explain these verses, because as I said, unless we have some idea of the Upanishads, these verses are difficult to understand. I'm going beyond my brief. I will tell one line or something about each of these verses. Dr. Ravi Shankar is going to explain this beautiful verse, Manasantu kim iti marga nekrate naiva manasam marge arjava. You will see the brilliance in Ramana in trying to say, what is this thing called the mind? The mind, is it a thing? Is it really an existent thing? Now, if you look, like if you use the word chariot, or if you use the word like fruit salad, it is a word. It normally you would think a word represents a thing. But if you really see, it is not really a thing. It is a collection of many things. And what is it a collection of? Explained in the next verse. It says, if you look at your verse, which Jyoti will be explaining, the mind consists of a number of thoughts. Whatever I see, Shabda, Sparsha, Rupa, Rasa, Gandha have all come into my mind as a thought. And Ramana calls each of them as Idam Vritti, Idam Vritti, Idam Vritti. My mind is full of Idam Vritti. But then you will see there is one central thought called Aham Vritti. I am seeing, I am hearing, I am feeling. Now, the mind, therefore, is a collection of thoughts called Idam Vritti, supported by one thought called Aham Vritti. Meenal has another nice verse to explain of who is this I. And then Ramana tries to say this I is a pseudo entity, one who does not have an existence of its own. And anything that does not have a real existence, if you make an inquiry, he gives a beautiful example of a person who is bossing around in a wedding, claiming to be of either grooms or bride party, and people treat him well because they do not know who they are. But when the groom's party and the bride party begin to inquire who this fellow is, suddenly the person disappears. So when you begin to inquire on who this fellow is, that is why Ramana gives a lot of emphasis on inquiry. And if you do this vicharana, then because all our problems are based on the ego, and ego can be the solution can be into the inquiry of the I. Now the next question is Ahaminasha Baji. Now, if ego is the cause of the problem, then what you do is you have to make a bhaji of this ego. Just by reducing, because ego represents edging God out. All you need to do is work on the ego. Spuriti Ritsvayam Paramapurna Sat. The real you manifests by itself. It's just like taking out of the rocks the blocks and the spring will come by itself. Sachin has a nice verse. Idam aham pada. Okay, this is a verse about sleep. There are the two eyes in me. There is one eye that comes and goes, but there is another eye which is always there. The alaya sattaya, the one that cannot be destroyed. Now, discover between you, there is that I, and Ramana calls this the I. Who is the real I? The real I is one who never goes, who is there all the time. And the one who's there all the time is the real you. Venkatesh Prasad has got a nice verse about how you go from the Annamaya Kosha to Pranamaya Kosha to Manomaya Kosha to Vijnanamaya Kosha. So it is a kind of a sadhana through Pancha Kosha Viveka to sensitize the mind before you understand something called the Atma. Because Bhagwan says, or Swami Param emphasizes, Sat and Chit are some of the most important things to understand. And if you're able to understand, that is why this week should be a lot of investment into all our previous studies and to help all our fellows. So as I said, there are many seniors and many juniors. Remember when I spoke about Gautama Buddha. Gautama Buddha was speaking to his student Subhuti, and he says, Subhuti, listen well and attentively. You have to make a chittopad. Chittopad means such a clear determination that you're going to take everyone along. Now, when we are studying these verses, I would like all of you to make an attempt, and if you have any difficulty with this verse, there are those verses, students who have been here for a longer time. All of us, including me, would be happy to take a phone call to be able to clarify all these doubts that you may have. Dr. Anupama has this verse about the distinction between is Sat and Chit one and the same, or is it possible for Chit to observe the Sat? This is looks like a very silly joke, but I will still say. One day, Sachin was feeling a little bored. Sachin, all of you know, the one who keeps time for all of us, who's been doing a lot of work to keep this large group together. Sachin goes and speaks to Dr. Divakar, a psychiatrist, and saying, I'm feeling very lonely, and can you split me into two so that I can spend some good time with myself? And Dr. Divakar, who's not only a psychiatrist, but also into Vedanta, says, I can't do it with you because you are Satchidananda, you are Sat Chit. Sat and Chit cannot be separated. So Sat and Chit are two aspects of one of the same thing. And Dr. Anupama, you will have to clarify and tell us how these things cannot be two things. And finally, it will be Dr. Divakar who will have to tell us about Jivatma, Paramatma, Aikyam. Essentially, it is the Desha, the lower aspect or the instrument through which you function that makes the great difference between the Upadi, that makes a difference between Jiva and Ishvara. With that, I will conclude. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarvam Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet.